Hello and welcome to another adult erotica in comics. You're watching SFon82. I am Scott. Scotty, call me whatever you want to call me, just as long as you hit that like button on the way in. I'm good with it. Today, we're going to be talking about bizarre sex comics from Kitchen Sink Press. Now first, I think we should start off by answering the question that you're probably wondering right now. What is bizarre sex comics? Bizarre Sex is a series of underground comics created by Denis Kitchen in 1972 on Kitchen Sink Press. It ran for 10 issues, and just like the name says, it contains stories depicting bizarre sex, violence, and other really bizarre and downright disgusting acts, quite frankly. I do feel it's pretty important to talk about the creator, Denis Kitchen. Denis Kitchen is a very important figure in the comic book world. Not only did he start up Kitchen Sink Press, which is responsible for some very popular underground comics, but he founded the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. He grew up in Wisconsin, attending William Horlick High School, where he would found the school paper, where he would contribute stories, ideas, and illustrations. This interest would continue while he was attending the University of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There, he co-founded and served as the art director for a humor magazine titled Snide. He would provide cartoons for both this and the University of Milwaukee, Wisconsin Post. Now, he would join ROTC just to later quit, attributing his quitting to an allergy from the wool on the uniform pants. He took classes in journalism, and being opposed to the Vietnam War, he joined the Socialist Labor Party of America. In '69, he decided to self-publish his own comics and cartoons in a magazine titled Mom's Homemade Comics, inspired by Zap Comics and Bijou Funnies. This proved to be very successful for Kitchen. He ended up selling out all 4,000 copies. This really motivated him to want to push this even further, and in 1970, Kitchen Sink Press was born. Now, through Kitchen Sink, he would launch an underground newspaper, and he was able to employ a bunch of local artists from around Milwaukee that deserved the work. Kitchen Sink would go on to publish many industry legends: Will Eisner, Harvey Kurtzman, Trina Robbins, Al Capp, Art Spiegelman. The list just goes on and on. Now, Denis Kitchen would also found the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, which is still around to this day. And I've talked about it in the previous two videos. We'll touch on it a little more later on in this video. But for now, let's dive into bizarre sex comics. Now, before I proceed with this video, viewer discretion is advised. This will contain some graphic material, some material that is definitely not suitable for the more sensitive viewers. So you have been warned. Now is your time to back out if you are sensitive to that type of material, or if you are not an adult. Now, touching on bizarre sex comics, the early issues were basically designed for their shock value, to shock people. They seem to want to underground the underground comic books, I guess you could say. These were some crazy issues. Issue 1 probably being the craziest. Now, I'll put up here on the screen some stuff that I can show from the first issue, which is not very much. The first issue contained stories from Tim Boxell. Daniel Klein contributed to issue 1. But the one that was probably the most disturbing was a comic strip by Grass Green, in which a brother and sister see their parents in the act of making love. And the brother and sister then begin to reenact that with each other in a very disturbing scene of incest. This story was actually removed from later printings of the comic. But talk about shocking. That's about as shocking and disgusting as you can get. Issue 2 contains an 8-page story from Grass Green and a lot of the same comic shock factor as issue 1. Now, I would love to get a lot more in depth with you guys about these particular issues. Some of the stuff I can't really talk about just because it's so graphic. And then also there is a lack of material out there for this. It was really kind of hard to find information on bizarre sex comics. So I just did the best that I could here. But the first 2 issues were mainly just providing shock value. They ended up doing so well and were so successful that Kitchen was actually able to take the funds and start bringing in some more talent. And starting with issue 3, we saw talent such as a story created by Mike Vosberg, a story by Mike Roberts, a story by cartoonist Howard Cruz called Barefoots. Stepping back and just kind of looking at the first 3 issues of this series, they were kind of garbage, to be honest with you. Shock value aside, they just really weren't that good. But all of that would change in issue 4. Now, every issue had graphic covers, but issue 4 in particular had a slipcover, an all-white slipcover, and what it was covering up was basically a very graphic cover depicting a woman's private parts and insertion involving a skyscraper. Just really, really crazy. I'll throw a censored version of it up on the screen here so you can kind of get a little bit of an idea. But with issue 4, Kitchen Sink began taking things to the next level, taking things a little bit more seriously. It was selling really well based off of the shock value, but they just really needed to continue bringing in better talent for the book. Now for issue 4, they were able to bring in Harvey Pekar, and Howard Cruz returns doing sort of an auto-bio type story that's really funny. Trina Robbins, I believe she's done some work on Wonder Woman. She does a couple of really weird short stories in this book as well. Even Robert Crumb contributes to the story. Now the issues keep coming in. They continue to improve. Kitchen continues bringing in more and more talent and better talent. Art Spiegelman returns. Steve Stiles, Richard Larson, Tim Boxell, Joe Coleman, Sharon Rudolph, and Denis Kitchen himself even does a story under the pseudonym Steve Krupp. Anybody that knows about the Bizarre Sex comics, anybody that actually knows anything about this series would tell you that issue 8 is the one that is probably the most memorable, the standout issue of the series, if there was a standout issue. Now in issue 8, we are introduced by a character. Now this series up to this point has pretty much been an anthology. I say pretty much, it has been an anthology of short stories by various talented artists. However, in this issue, we get 42 pages of a character by the name of Omaha the Cat Dancer by artist Reed Waller. And it's a story, it's sort of a soap opera, it's an adult soap opera, a little bit of a mob type feel to it as well, but mainly an adult soap opera that centers around Omaha, who is an exotic dancer in an anthropomorphic world. So this series ended up taking off. I actually did my previous video, the last video for adult erotica in comics that I did. I covered Omaha in comics. So if you haven't checked out that video, definitely go check it out. You'll learn a lot more about this series. Omaha took off. It was a pretty successful series in terms of, as far as underground comics goes. And it was another one of those comics that were being confiscated when comic shop owners were getting arrested in the 90s for carrying obscene materials such as Eros comics and things of that sort. Omaha Comics was one of those books that were being pulled off the shelf along with a lot of other titles. And comic shop owners were actually being arrested, leading to Denis Kitchen coming up with the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. But issue 8, definitely the standout issue, introduced to Omaha the Cat Dancer. From there, the Bizarre Sex series actually begins to evolve into a good anthology series, rather than relying on pure shock value. Now, this anthology started off really bad, but it ended up getting really good by the end. The first 3 issues being horrible, disgusting, lewd comic books. This series evolves, and by issue 10, we're left with a really good anthology series that I would highly recommend. It's kind of crazy from start to finish where it goes, but Kitchen continued to bring in the artist, and the stories continued to get better and better until we were left with a really good comic book in issue 10. I would highly recommend checking them out. I know I'm going to go back and try to find as many of them as I can find at this point. Now, what's crazy about these books, and all 3 of the books that I have covered in this series so far are all included in this. But all of these titles have one thing for sure in common that I'm covering in these. All of these books were getting people in trouble in the 90s. They were all being confiscated. Comic shops were getting raided for all these titles. And Denis Kitchen really did an amazing thing when he founded the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. I did want to talk about that a little bit before we end the video. Now, to give you guys a little bit of an explanation of what the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund is that Denis Kitchen founded, it was founded in 1986, and it is a fund helping comic shop owners, artists, and other victims of artistic criminalization. It's a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting the First Amendment rights of the comic book medium. And founded in 86, like I said a few minutes ago, and ever since being founded, has managed and paid for the legal defense of individuals whose First Amendment rights have been threatened by making, selling, and or reading comic books. So the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund is an amazing thing. It's still going as far as I know to this day. I've heard of many different cases where this has absolutely saved people's lives. And I think Denis Kitchen did an amazing thing founding it, as well as founding Kitchen Sink Comics, as well as his creations, his artwork, his writing. Really a really cool guy. I've had so much fun doing the research for Bizarre Sex Comics. I want to thank you guys that have tuned in for this series, Adult Erotica in Comics. I've had so much fun making these videos. I enjoy each one that I do. I'm always learning something, and my goal is hopefully you guys learn something too. I hope to see you guys next Wednesday when I will drop a brand new video for Adult Erotica in Comics. Who knows what I'll cover next? Stick around and see. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.